Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone. Maybe the volume needs to be raised. There you go. Good afternoon. My name is Tony Payan. I'm the director of the Center for the U.S. and Mexico here at Rice University's Becker Institute for Public Policy. I really want to welcome you all to the halls of the Becker Institute this afternoon for a great conversation. Not the only one. The Center for the U.S. and Mexico, as well as the Becker Institute, through the Becker Institute Immigration Initiative, have been addressing some of these key issues, and we are very pleased to be partnering with, of course, Linda Lorelle and Stan Marek, and a whole group of people, and of course, welcome to all of you, to the co-organizers, and of course the panelists. Thank you for coming today. I want to introduce to you our opening keynote for this afternoon. It is really a pleasure to have someone like this here at the Becker Institute, Jean Becker. Jean Becker was Chief of Staff for George H.W. Bush from March 1st, 1994 until his death on November 30th, 2018. Obviously, as the Chief of Staff, she supervised the offices both in Houston and Kennebunkport. Before that, Jean was a journalist and quite a accomplished journalist. In fact, her book, I think, The Man I Knew, The Amazing Story of George H.W. Bush, Post-Presidency, was a New York Times bestseller for a bit. So it's really wonderful to have her here share her thoughts with us. And then she serves in a number of boards, not the least of which is, of course, Points of Light and the George and Barbara Bush Foundation. So please help me welcome Jean Becker to the podium. Jean, welcome.
Thank you so much for being here. Both for those of you who are here, I know you'd rather be listening to Blake Shelton at the rodeo. So thank you for being with us, and also for everyone who's with us on live stream. And Tony, thank you to where'd you go? Your team has been amazing for hosting us here. My job tonight is to try to introduce to you civil dialogues. And I'm going to tell a couple of stories to sort of put this in context. I'm going to talk about my former boss. In October of 1991, President George H.W. Bush, with his best friend and trusted Secretary of State, James A. Baker III, co-hosted with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev what became known as the Madrid Peace Conference. There is the class photo from that conference. You're going to find this hard to believe, but standing on those stairs in Madrid are the heads of state from Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon, as well as a joint Jordanian-Palestinian delegation. For the first time, all of the parties to the Arab-Israeli conflict gathered to hold direct negotiations, which at that time was unprecedented. They've never had ever before been in the same room. I'm thinking maybe they should have locked the door, but the point is, they came together then, and they tried. They talked to each other. I want to show you just this is during the Madrid Peace Conference, the amazing relationship between President Bush and Secretary Baker. When President Bush died, Tom Brokaw of NBC News said on the air that this friendship probably changed the world. And I'm a little prejudiced. I think he's probably right. Let me tell you another story that's a little closer to home. In the spring of 2015, President Bush welcomed to his office a group of Black ministers and Houston police officers. This meeting was held right after a young Black man named Michael Brown had been shot in Ferguson, Missouri. And in Houston, the police and the ministers had been working together for a number of years in a program called Thumbs Up. But President Bush asked them to come to his office and to sit down and to talk to each other with him sort of as their moderator. A number of them told me that him inviting them to his office encouraged them to try harder, and they did. So you might be wondering what these two very different stories have to do with why we're here tonight. It's a great question. My former boss was the champion of trying to bring people together to talk through their disagreements and to try to find a path forward. And that would include some of his political opponents. Whoops. Now, if I can figure out how to use the laser, some of you probably know what you're looking at here. This is January 20th, 1969. Richard Nixon is being sworn in as the first Republican president since Dwight Eisenhower. But Congressman George Bush from Houston, Texas, a Republican, decided, that's him right there, he should go to Andrews Air Force Base to wish LBJ goodbye, because LBJ was the Texas president, and LBJ spotted him in the crowd and reached across a bunch of people to shake George Bush's hand. So Congressman Bush skipped the Republican inauguration and went to Andrews Air Force Base instead. Lyndon Johnson never forgot this, and the Johnson girls never forgot this. And this photo sat in President Bush's office until the day he died. He really loved this photo. Now, a story that you may be better familiar with, I keep going backwards. President Bush's friendship with Bill Clinton was one of the most talked about friendships in the world. They became best friends. The 1992 election was not easy. President Bush once said that his dog Millie knew more about foreign affairs than Bill Clinton did. And of course, Bill Clinton kept saying it's the economy, stupid. But they came together and they literally raised hundreds of millions of dollars for disaster relief all over the world. This happens to be Galveston, Texas, and after Hurricane Ike. And of course, standing next to President Bush, I don't know if you can see him, is of course Secretary Baker. They dragged him into Hurricane Ike relief. Next, whoops. I should be embarrassed to show you this photo because that is me in the background photobombing this photo. But this is Hurricane Harvey, which everyone in this room is familiar with, when 50 inches of rain dumped on Houston. And the two President Bushes decided that they needed to raise money to help Houston. And President Bush said to me, you know, Jean, just as an FYI, let my other former president colleagues know, just as an FYI, that George and I are gonna do a Hurricane Harvey fund. Well, this is a fundraiser at Texas A&M, and they all came, every single former president. I will tell you that when I told the Bushes that all four former presidents, well, we knew George W. was coming, but that Presidents Clinton, Carter, and Obama were coming, President Bush cried. He was so touched. Mrs. Bush asked if she had to give them dinner. And I said, yes, you do. They raised $43 million that night because all of them came together. Reaching across the aisle. Now there's an idea. Sadly, it's not a trait you see much of these days. Even amongst ourselves, we tend to talk at each other, but not with each other. It's my way or the highway. Agree with me or get out. I've said that before. More than a year ago, my friend Linda Lorelle and I were sitting in a bar. Okay, that's not true. We were having lunch, but I do feel like sitting in a bar is a lot sexier. So let's just pretend we were sitting in a bar, but we were having lunch. Our lunch conversation, we got together just to catch up as friends. We're former University of Missouri journalism school graduates, and I don't want to embarrass Linda, but she was President Bush's favorite Houston anchor. If he wanted to give an interview, he said, get Linda over here. So we had become friends. Our conversation was dominated by how worried we were about our country. We were scared and worried. When are we going to stop yelling at each other? And Linda and I decided that it's everyone's job, including ours, to do something, to do anything. We began a conversation with the heads of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation and the foundations of the LBJ and Clinton libraries, and a few other groups, including the Baker Institute, to whom we are most grateful for seizing the moment and hosting our first event. We hope this is only the beginning, and during the next year, we will have a series of dialogues at various presidential library centers, policy institutes, and other forums to discuss some of the important topics of the day, especially since we're in an election year. We're calling them civil dialogues. The idea is to give you a chance to listen to the experts who can talk about various sides of the issues. After all, every issue does have various sides, and then give you a chance to ask your questions, voice your concerns, and make your opinion known. No shouting, no name calling, no vitriol, just dialogue. So let's get started. And what better place to start in Texas than with immigration? And on that note, I'm going to do the smartest thing I've done in weeks. I'm going to turn this over to my wonderful partner, Linda Lorelle. If you're a Houstonian, you know that Linda is an Emmy Award journalist who anchored the evening news on Channel 2, KPRC, for nearly 17 years. Today, she's CEO and executive producer of Linda Lorelle Media, a video production and communications consulting firm. Linda, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Jean. Hi, everybody. It's really wonderful to see all of you here and to see a full room this evening, and welcome to all of our live stream participants as well. It has been quite a journey to get to tonight's launch of Civil Dialogues. As Jean indicated, it's just the beginning of what we hope will be constructive conversations across the country leading up to and beyond the election in November. And it is also an opportunity for each and every one of us to play our designated role to ensure a healthy democracy, the role of educated, engaged citizen. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education." That is our goal here tonight and going forward, educating ourselves, as Jean said, about all sides of the difficult issues facing our nation, in tonight's case, immigration. At the end of this evening's town hall, we hope that you will walk away with a better understanding of the nuances of this incendiary topic, and that you will feel seen, heard, and empowered to continue dialogue. To that end, there's a 30-minute breakout session immediately following our discussion where you can learn more about how to have difficult conversations. That will be happening right here in this room. Many of you have already pre-registered for it. Even if you have not, you are welcome to stay. Dan Snare will be leading that session. Dan served for 7 years as CEO and president of the American Leadership Forum Houston Gulf Coast chapter. Dan is going to come up here now just for a moment to tell you very quickly about what's going to happen in the session, and also to share some values and standards that we are all expected to adhere to as our conversation unfolds. Dan, please come on up. Please give Dan a nice welcome.
Thank you, Linda and Jean. And it's a real honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight. We have all kinds of difficult issues that we face as a world, as a country, as a nation these days, immigration being one of them. And we engage in a tremendous amount of debate around those, right? We debate a lot. And my question to you is, how's that working for us? Okay. So I was honored to be asked to come and share with you some ideas that an amazing Houstonian by the name of Joseph Jaworski came up with when he founded the American Leadership Forum, and that we've been teaching throughout this community for a while around dialogue. And dialogue to build relationship, to build trust, to co-create new understandings in different ways of approaching issues that recognize that we all have different opinions, different backgrounds, different needs, but we can find common ground and we can find shared values. So with that, for the portion of the evening before we go into the workshop, I just invite you to practice some of these values. The first is respect. If I do not respect you and your opinions, how can I ask you to respect mine? Curiosity. To be curious. We need to understand things differently, but we need to understand why we bring different things to the table. Right? And dialogue is about discovery. It's not about persuasion, right? It's about inviting us into letting go of our certainties, looking at how we might discover together new ways of looking at the situation, and co-creating new opportunities to do better. These are not issues we're going to solve, but we have an obligation and a responsibility to constantly do better. And if we engage in real meaningful dialogue, we can begin to do that and move away from debate where we accomplish nothing. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you more later.
Thank you so much, Dan. As we get underway, we think it's important to lay some historical context. What is the history of immigration in the United States? What role does immigration play in our country's identity and economy? And how did immigration become illegal in the first place? This short film, produced by Rational Middle Immigration, answers those questions and more. Let's watch.
An immigrant is someone born in another country with citizenship in another country who wants to come to the United States to pursue their dreams.
We are a nation of immigrants. Except for Native Americans, we've all come here from somewhere.
People coming here to make a better lives for themselves and to be part of the American experience are what built this country.
They come to join family. They come to work. They come for opportunity. They come because they believe in the American dream.
There's an interesting relationship between what our country needs and what immigrants give to our country.
This is the first nation in the history of the world that can say we are a free people and we come from everywhere.
Through the early history, it was overwhelmingly from European nations. They came because of religious persecution, the Pilgrims. They came because of famine, the Irish, the potato famine, and so forth.
The United States has been seen as a land of opportunity. Not that they knew what the opportunity was, it was just going to be a different place and they could build their own life.
Up till the 1870s, the United States had really no immigration system. It was kind of whoever got here was here. And that took us from the days of Columbus through the Industrial Revolution.
For the best part of America, we were trying to fill up this continent, manifest destiny. We were doing everything to encourage immigration.
After the 1870s, you saw efforts to really curtail and control immigration so that it was only limited, frankly, to Western European countries.
It was not until 1924 that we had our first permanent quotas. The quotas were imposed based upon the national origin system, so we would get the right kind of immigrants. But when Congress imposed quotas, they cut off virtually all avenues for people to come legally. Now, this is the problem. if you think about it, we had huge barriers from most countries. We had the Atlantic Ocean, we had the Pacific Ocean. Latin America, we have adjoining land borders, and people could literally walk in here. We had literally centuries of what we call circular immigration. People would come from Latin America, overwhelmingly from Mexico, to work. They would work, they'd go home, they'd work and go home.
These immigrants came in because there was a job magnet here in the United States. There was a need to fill lower skilled or lesser skilled service jobs.
Starting in the mid-70s, we started increasing enforcement. People that would come back and forth and normally work within 100 miles of the border, they did something quite logical. Instead of going home and seeing my family on the weekends, I'll smuggle them in on a one-time basis. And that began to create this phenomena that has entered into our political debate of large-scale illegal immigration.
Being a nation of immigrants isn't just a key component to our culture. It's been a key driver in creating the world's most powerful economy, the world's most dynamic economy.
Immigrants supplement our workforce as landscapers, construction workers, service workers, hospitality workers. Although they may not have a lot of formal education, many of them come with skills and abilities that really contribute to these industries.
Immigrants actually fuel the economy. You can't get to 3 or 4 or 5% growth in GDP without immigrant workers. And, you know, I find that to be kind of missing from the whole argument here that, you know, if you want to grow and you want to increase and expand U.S. businesses in the United States, you've got to have people to do the work.
On the other side of things, immigrants bring creativity, and they bring building businesses, starting businesses. About half of the .com companies that we have in this country were created either by immigrants or children of immigrants.
I mean, these are big companies that are having a major footprint on the nation's economy. But then when you get down below that, you see approximately 28% of small businesses have been founded by immigrants. So the economic impact of immigration is not just your Fortune 500 company. It's the small business on the corner who is creating jobs for American workers and their families that they're going to every day.
That's the beauty of America. That's what I think makes America strong. It's essentially a concept of fairness based upon what a person can do as opposed to who a person is. That's what makes people come here.
But this is a great paradox, I think, that we cannot think of the United States as anything else but a nation that migrants come to inject vitality, inject dynamism, creativity, talent, and then become part of the society.
That immigrant who left any of a number of countries around the world to come to the United States to pursue their dream, they do that because they believe in the idea of America. The question is, do Americans still believe in the idea of America as a nation of immigrants? We are seeing not just a tension that comes with this question, but I think a tipping point for the country.
Our immigration system is stuck in the 1990s, literally. It's the last time that we have made any major renovations to our immigration system. Because of the failure of leadership in building an immigration system that's responsive to, the modern economy that we have today. A lot of the immigration that comes outside of the system is happening because our system has closed itself off to the realities of our time.
We've never had immigration law built on economics. If you build it on, you deserve this, if people look and see someone here who's undocumented and here illegally, they think you don't deserve this. On the other hand, if we say the purpose of immigration is to build a stronger economy, a greater social fabric, that's a very different framing of the problem.
I do believe that most Americans want to see that immigration reform. I think there's some out there on the fringe fueling this fear that immigrants are criminals, sucking off of our welfare system, and they are taking our jobs. Fact shows that's just not the case.
The majority of Americans are people of goodwill. They may not be Democrats, they may not be Republicans, they're living in the literal and figurative middle of the country. So I'm optimistic that those Americans of goodwill will add their voices to the debate.
It is a proud privilege to be a citizen of the great republic, to hear its song sung, to realize that we are the descendants of 40 million people who left other countries, other familiar scenes, to come here to the United States to build a new life, to make a new opportunity for themselves and their children. I think it is not a burden, but a privilege to make this really, as it was for them, a new world. That's what this country has stood for 200 years, and that's what this country will continue to stand for.
Bit of the context. It's time for me to introduce our esteemed panelists. Tony Payan, you've already met, but I'll tell you a little more about him. Tony is director of the Center for the U.S. and Mexico here at Rice University's Baker Institute. He has been researching immigration issues for 2.5 decades. He has led a major project on immigration at the Baker Institute for several years now. Please welcome Tony Payan. John Gable is co-founder and CEO of All Sides, an online news site that tackles media bias and exposes people to information and ideas from all sides of the political spectrum so they can better understand the world. He often writes about bias, news media, polarization, and how technology impacts these things. He's a tech guy. His rich technology background includes being the PM team lead for Netscape Navigator, the iconic web browser, and being on the original team for Microsoft Office. Prior to his technology career, John worked in politics for 3 U.S. senators, 1 president, George H.W. Bush, and a national political party, Republican Party. Please welcome John Gable. He just flew in from San Francisco to be here. Elizabeth Mendoza is a proud Rice alum who has practiced immigration law exclusively since 1993 here in Houston. Her practice focuses on removal defense and family consular processing humanitarian cases. Recently, she wrote 2 policy papers for the Baker Institute regarding needed reforms to the immigration court system and immigration laws. Elizabeth has lobbied Congress and the Texas legislature for immigration reform and has served as liaison to the immigration court system here in Houston since 2018 on behalf of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Please welcome Liz Mendoza. Stan Merrick is president and CEO of the Merrick family of companies, one of the largest interior contractors in the Southwest, operating in 3 states with 5,000 employees. Stan's family immigrated from Czechoslovakia and survived extremely challenging times, including homelessness, after their arrival here in America. For more than 20 years now, Stan has been an advocate for meaningful immigration reform. He is a major financial backer of the Rational Middle immigration films, including the one we just watched. Please welcome Stan Merrick.
Thank you.
Dr. Raymond Robertson is professor and holder of the Helen and Roy Ryu Chair in Economics and Government in the Departments of International Affairs at the Bush School of Government and Public Service, and the director of the Mosbacher Institute for Trade, Economics, and Public Policy, all of the above at Texas A&M University. He is a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Labor in Bonn, Germany, and a senior research fellow at the Mission Foods Texas-Mexico Center. Please welcome Dr. Raymond Robertson. And now let's get to it. So, I think we have to start with the border because it is looming large, the crisis there. President Biden and former President Trump are both expected at the border this Thursday, day after tomorrow. President Biden expected in Brownsville. Trump will be at Eagle Pass. Tony, you have been spending a lot of time on this issue, so I'm going to let you start us off with your thoughts about where we are now and where we can realistically go to solve this crisis.
I guess the one thing that I want to point out in regards to the U.S.-Mexico border and the immigration crisis is whether it is a crisis or not. Evidently, when you see numbers like we've seen for the last 3 years, almost 6 million encounters on the U.S.-Mexico border, just under the Biden administration, you could say that there is a very serious crisis, even if you compensate for the repeats, because an individual can be responsible for several encounters. 20%, 50%, 20%, 40%, we don't know. But even then, even if you concede at 40%, you still have, a good 3.5 million people showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border. I think the other thing that we have to look at is the fact that it's not that the U.S. cannot process 3 million people. This society can absorb, I think, 3 million and more. It's just that the system, and it was quite a picture that we saw on the film, essentially a funnel. All these people coming in, but the system is so sclerotic, it can only process, I think, 1,000 a day or something like that. So we need to invest the resources to get these people paroled in, get them before an immigration judge, see if they qualify to stay in the United States, and move them on. This is a matter of resources, of investing in the right number of judges, immigration judges, courts, the filtering system, because otherwise, the crisis is actually a matter of resources, and I think, unfortunately, I think it's quite profitable for many politicians to maintain it. We're not in the business of problem solving, we're in the business of crisis maintenance, and I think that is the problem. It's political.
So a lot of the things that you just articulated that could and should be done are in the bill, the bipartisan bill that was voted down in the Senate 3 weeks ago. So, John, I'm going to let you kind of continue this thread as someone. So let me just tell you a little bit really quickly about All Sides. So you can go to All Sides' website and look at a particular news story or an issue and see it presented from the left, from the center, and from the right. So you then have an opportunity to look at it and make up your own mind about where the truth lies somewhere in the middle of all that. So what's your perspective on why we are where we are with the border as it relates to communication, messaging, wherever you want to go with this?
Yeah, I love actually,
we're
yes,
good.
You got me. Good.
Yep.
I love how you describe it's a political problem. And I actually might go even deeper. Why is there a political problem? Is it that there's a cultural problem or a societal problem? And it's actually gotten a little worse in society. I was talking to somebody earlier to describe it even better than I do, where it's actually becoming more difficult to talk with each other about solving any problem. It's not a new thing that politicians don't want to solve problems because they get elected because they are a champion of a problem. But we have managed in the past to get things done. And what has changed, not just in the US, but worldwide? And this, I hate to describe, since I'm a technology guy, that this technology thing may not have gone exactly the way it was supposed to go. When we started with the internet, the whole idea was we get better information, we can make better decisions. We'd be able to meet people all around the world as individuals and get to understand them, not as a stereotype, but as a person. And in a lot of ways, the internet and technology has done exactly that. In a lot of other ways, it's done the exact opposite. Because with this overwhelming information, we have to only see people we know that are just like us, only see a point of view we already agree with. And there's a lot of psychology and research that shows that when that happens, all of us become much more extreme and much less tolerant of any other idea or any other person. So the first thing we've got to do is get us out of that, out of these filter bubbles that are dividing us and making us not just polarized. Disagreements are good, but polarized, what's called effective polarization. You and I disagree about what to do about the environment or immigration or school choice or whatever you want. But since you and I disagree on that, we're not just different, you're evil. And therefore I won't work with you even when we agree with each other because you're evil. And that is what's plaguing the world, in modern world, from Brexit to crises and wars internationally and in the US. There are lots of things in the US we want to do better, but I don't think it's a US specific problem. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the things that are happening in our culture, it is really more technology driven, but that's just technology the way it is right now. It's changing.
It's changing.
And we have the ability to change it for ways that actually free us from those bubbles. And that comes to for both getting outside the information bubble and the relationship bubble, which is all about civil dialogue and how to do that in mass with small groups of people. And so what you're doing is exactly what we're hoping to do in a much more scalable way worldwide with average people. Because once you get the culture, the people demanding a solution,
well, it's so hard.
Then we can force the politicians to bring us those solutions.
You talked about getting out of the filter bubbles, and it's so difficult to do that because we now can go to the news channel of our choice to get our own point of view reinforced. And we don't ever have to listen to the other side if we don't want to. And it hasn't always been that way. Liz, I'm going to ask you to bring us back to the border a little bit from your perspective as an immigration attorney who has spent a lot of time there in dealing with cases of people coming across the border. What are your thoughts about where we are now and what actual progress we can make, if any, in this polarized Congress? And I'm going to ask you to move your hair because it's covering your microphone. Thank you. There we go, so we can hear you. Go ahead.
I think I'm going to answer your second question first.
Okay, whatever order.
Which is going to echo some of what Tony said. We need more infrastructure. So if you look at the statistics and the figures for the past at least 2 administrations, you see that the budgeting for enforcement has skyrocketed, but on the benefit side, it's stayed flat. So if you have all of this money being pumped into enforcement, those cases and those people are being funneled into a system that's been starved for infrastructure. We don't have enough asylum officers, we don't have enough CIS officers, so we have ridiculous delays in processing cases. It can take over a year to get a work permit. We don't have enough immigration courts, we don't have enough immigration judges. So we are not seeing that the budgeting needs are being met on the benefit side, but it's definitely being met on the enforcement side. So we need more infrastructure to deal with just the logistics of how do you deal with all of these people who are presenting at the border? How do we process them? Where do we put them? But to address your first question, as somebody who's done this now for over 30 years, and I have colleagues here who've been practicing even longer than me, who are in the audience tonight. It's been a really scary, sad time for almost the past decade for those of us who work in my ecosystem. We represent immigrants and the people who are trying to have a loved one or a business, bring over a loved one or a business, bring over a very key needed employee. So it's been dark times, it's been rough, it's been hard. And my perspective on it is that we have certain politicians who have tapped into this deep, ugly, dark vein in this country. And it's been extraordinarily effective to have this problem and to tap into this vein. And you see to be perfectly frank, you see the racism of what is behind a lot of the vitriol and a lot of the propaganda about what is happening at the border, and it's playing out for all of us to see. And it's been tough to try and have conversations with people and explain, okay, well, this is the reality of what the system is, how it's supposed to operate. There is no magic line that people can get in to come the right way, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been hard to hear a lot of the rhetoric that's been out there for the past couple of years. You know, immigrants are infesting the country, they're poisoning the blood. But I'm very hopeful that efforts like tonight can help people have dialogues and reach some common agreement, because it's possible. It's possible.
And what you just articulated is the whole reason that Jean and I and the others who are part of this are trying to have these kinds of conversations to help really get to the truth of what the situation is. Stan, you have devoted a great deal of your life and your time and your treasure to this issue. As an employer, someone who employs dreamers, someone who sees firsthand the impact of our broken immigration system, not only on the lives of his employees, but also the impact that it has on you as an employer and that it has on us as consumers of your product because of the lack of training and the whole labor broker situation. So I'm going to ask you to kind of connect the dots from your perspective and how some of the ideas that you have might help us deal with the situation at the border.
Well, that's a good question. And you think about, we're a construction company, and our first generation of workers were after WW2. They were the Czechs, the Poles, the Germans, my people from Czechoslovakia, skills they brought to the United States, and they were all legal. Most of them were in the greatest generation, fought in World War II. And as time went on, there were fewer native-born Americans going into construction because it's not easy, it's hard work, it's blue collar, and the Latino population stepped up. And we had tons of wonderful Latino workers coming in. And in 1986, President Reagan, Immigration Reform Act, had the bill to make available amnesty to over 3.5 million Latinos. Many of them took advantage of that. We built our workforce with Latinos. We trained them, just tremendous workers, great with their hands, and plenty of them. And 1986 was the last opportunity for a construction worker to come to the United States legally. Well, what has happened since 1986? The country has exploded. The workers came, but there was no way to get legal. So what happened? Well, some get fake IDs. Some just work for cash. But we probably have 12 to 20 million people in this country, many of them in construction, that have no way to get legal status. This building you're looking at was built by our immigrants, Merrick's company immigrants. Everything you see here, we built. And if I had to do this today, it would be much more difficult. We could get it done, but the availability of workers in this country right now has never been higher. Not the availability, the demand.
Stan, tell them how many workers could you employ right now just to take care of the jobs that you have on your books?
We could probably put 1,000 workers to work. If we could find legal people, fill out an I-9, a social security number, I think we could put them to work in the morning. The sad part is they're out there, they're working, but not for legally.
So we were talking the other day about how many people you have to hire. Let's say you hire 100. Of those 100, how many do you train and how many stay?
We probably get 10%. 10%.
10%.
Our kids that go to high school here, even first-generation Americans from Latino families, they don't want to hang sheetrock. They don't want to do concrete. They don't want to. There's too many opportunities. So we are still very dependent on an immigrant workforce that has no legal way to get here, but they're coming. You can come across that border, you can fly in on Southwest Airlines, and you can go to any job site, any housing project in this country and go to work tomorrow. Nobody is going to ask if you're legal. They're going to say, do you have papers? Sure. Got them off the internet. Here they are. And it's just a fact. Nobody wants to admit it, but that's a fact.
There was a headline this afternoon that I saw in the Washington Post, and it was, "The economy is roaring, immigration is a key reason." So, Raymond, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us some numbers because you're the numbers guy. So you spend a lot of time researching this issue. What's the reality that people aren't getting about this topic?
Sure, yeah, thank you very much, Linda. If I may, if I'm going to just take a moment. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank Jean and you for doing this as American heroes. I really think you are both American heroes. So this is needed now more than ever. So thank you very much. And thank you for the question. I wrestle with this because, my dad is virtually anti-immigrant. And so we have this very difficult discussion. It's the only thing we disagree on. And I try to present the same kind of numbers, that immigrants are about 14% of the population, but they start about 25% of the new businesses, right? And as the video showed, a lot of those are multi-million-dollar businesses that create lots of jobs, and you said the same thing. What wasn't in the video, I think, that people also don't understand is that in almost all of the academic studies that have tried to assess how immigrants affect wages of natives, right? There's this myth that, or this idea that people are coming in to steal our jobs and they're pushing down wages. There's almost no academic evidence to support that point. That most of the academic evidence shows that when migrants come in, wages actually don't change at all, which seems weird if you have studied supply and demand. I don't know how many of you have had some basic economics, but the answer to this puzzle is that the American economy is so diverse that we can reshuffle production in a way that we can easily absorb these new immigrants, exactly as Stan has pointed out, and so have other members of the panel. It's the diversity and the strength and the dynamism of the American economy that really makes this idea that migrants push down wages to be just basically not true.
One of the other elements in this conversation is that we in this country have a declining birth rate, right? So we very soon are not going to have enough people to fill the jobs that are out there. And the labor shortage that we're experiencing as a nation is not specific to the construction industry. Healthcare, I mean, hello, Houston, we know this, right? We're right here in the middle of the greatest medical center in the world. I don't know how many jobs are available in healthcare right now, but there is a tremendous shortage. So I guess my next question is, how do we get to the point where, conversations like this where we're trying to dispel some of the myths and help people really understand all of the different nuances and sides of the topic. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the political will of the lawmakers who have the opportunity to pass the bills and make the laws, to listen to us and do it. So where do we go? Who wants to jump in on that? Go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, so one thing I think that I've observed in the economy and throughout our political dialogue is that when we're quick to anger, we're very slow to understand. And right now, Americans are very addicted to anger. And when we're getting anger from our news, and the reason why is that you get this dopamine rush from watching news that makes you angry. And anger will motivate you to go out and protest or to call someone or cast a vote or protest or whatever, but it doesn't lead to very good decisions. So one of the first things I think we need to do, and going back to why I think you two are heroes, is that we need to let go of this anger. We need to stop feeding ourselves the media or the information that makes us so angry and let that go and take a step back and say, what are the facts? What are the information like that we can get on all sides and start thinking more clearly? Because until we do that and until we convince our neighbors to do that, to let go of that kind of anger, I don't think we're going to make any real progress.
Well, that's a perfect segue to you, John. So what are your thoughts on this, and what are you seeing on your site? And tell people a little bit more about how All Sides operates, and then what you're seeing from your perspective in terms of how we're feeling.
The first thing I see at panels like this is I'm really glad we picked the name All Sides, because people can't talk about this without saying our company name.
Yes.
It's kind of nice. There is actually a shift that's been happening. So when we first did our first prototype, so what we really focused on is the ability for information to flow so that people can get out of their bubbles. And yes, there's dopamine. I think about food. I mean, I love Mountain Dew and Snickers and Doritos, but I don't go to a restaurant for that. But it's a great dopamine hit. And so if we use the media business model for how to run a restaurant, the only restaurants we would have a lot of Mountain Dew and Snickers and Doritos, and they'd all be 7-Elevens. And I like that stuff, and I like Kentucky Fried Chicken too. I'm from Kentucky. But we actually choose to go to restaurants that are actually give us better food, or we have a Whole Foods option. We don't just go to 7-Eleven all the time. It's not that we all choose to always have the dopamine hit. It's that we don't have the option for a Whole Foods or a better restaurant right now, because the media circle has gotten so addicted to the dopamine hit, to that sugar rush, that we can't do anything else. The great opportunity, though, is when we first started looking at this, when we first did a patent on a way to identify different perspectives, we did our first prototype 11 years ago. And back then, people didn't think there was a problem. They didn't think there really was a problem with our society dividing and not appreciating each other. Now, everybody knows that's a problem. And just like an addict, the first step is to understand we have a problem. So we've done step one. I'm seeing, and a lot of data supporting, where people are just fed up with what's going on. There's actually a pushback. People are beginning to recognize that it's only a tiny percentage of Twitter obnoxious people getting all the news, and that does not represent America. Don't fall in the trap that thinks that all those other people we don't know are all just addicted to anger and addicted to hating each other. That's just that people are getting all the spotlight information, all the spotlights. They're not America. We're getting caught up into that. We're being taught that that's what it's like, but it's not what it is. We're kind of in a cycle like the 60s, but more driven through technology and makes it worse. But now we're pushing back, and now people are looking for that opportunity. I think that's a great, and I'll give you some examples of good signs there. I so much want to take what you all have done and what Jean was talking about earlier and show that to the world, because people see it, they understand it. And there's interest in that. But all sides, we're just a little technology company. We've actually spent no money in advertising. And this month, a small month, we already have over 60 million impressions because people are so fed up. And there are all these media companies going out of business or laying people off, and we're growing. Our audience is growing. Not because we've done anything great with advertising, although we're hoping to raise money so we can do that, but because there's a real huge unmet demand for sanity, for understanding each other, for actually connecting with each other and solving problems. There's this great unmet demand. It's not just us. And when you look at society and look at what it takes to change society, when we talk to other academics that I talked about changes in society, how you do that, they talk about a 3.5% critical mass. They talk about movements. And when you get about 3.5% of a populace engaged in that movement, every time you hit that critical mass, there are other factors, but that's mainly the main one, then things change. Policy changes, culture changes, politicians changes, laws change. 3.5%, we have 330 million Americans. That's 5.5 million voters, 10.5 million adults. And coming from Netscape and Microsoft, that's a very achievable number. I don't want to just be part of making this better, but there are 5,000 organizations around the US, as measured by Princeton last year, working to bridge divides that aren't being covered. There's the incredible work that you all are doing that I didn't know about until recently. I knew you were doing something great, Linda, but I didn't know what you were doing until recently. This is not let's fight the good fight. This is an achievable thing we can do to change society so we can actually give our politicians permission to solve problems. And that's what I like us to do.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, I want to shift now to start talking a little bit about some of the solutions that are out there. And I know you've written a policy paper recently for the Baker Institute. Talk to us a little bit about that, because you have some ideas about some things that Congress literally could do right now if we could force them to do something. But let's talk about the solution side of things for a moment.
So I think I want to use this opportunity right now to push something that's very dear to my heart, and that's the Afghan Adjustment Act. Okay. That should be an easy fix, but politics has gotten in the way. So there is a bill pending called the Afghan Adjustment Act, which would create a pathway to permanent residency for the over 70,000 Afghans that we evacuated from Afghanistan in August of 2021. Many of those people fought alongside our soldiers in the many years that we were in Afghanistan. We evacuated these people when the Taliban came into Kabul and took control of the country again because we had withdrawn from Afghanistan. And there's precedent for passing legislation to help, certain populations that we brought over. We did that with the Vietnamese boat people. We did that with the Cubans in 1980 with the Mariel boat lift. So we've done this before. We can do big things in immigration world. So we have this community of Afghans that are here. We have about 5,000 to 6,000 here in Houston, Texas, that have been resettled by our charities, Catholic Charities, the YMCA, the Alliance, that have helped resettle these families. But they don't have any certainty of will they get to stay. So they've had to go down the path of applying for special visas, trying to apply for asylum, and going through the maze of what is our immigration bureaucracies to try and get some permanency for their families here in this country. Last year, I and some of the colleagues that, and dear friends of mine who are here tonight, we lobbied in DC. We asked our political leaders, we asked our elected representatives, support this legislation, support it. And it was a lot of shut doors. In my opinion, it's politics that have gotten in the way of what would seemingly be such an easy thing to do. You know, these are people that we relied on. These are people that, you know, our soldiers' lives many times were saved by these people. We brought them over, and they're kind of left dangling. And so this is just one example of what would be an easy fix in Congress. Mm-hmm. There's bipartisan support. Mm-hmm. We've come so close more than once. Mm-hmm. And then when we get really close to the finish line, politics get in the way.
Right.
We've seen the same thing with Dreamers.
I was just going to try to segue to that because I'm going to ask Stan to talk about DACA because that's another sort of no-brainer to do. Talk a little bit about it. I know you employ some Dreamers. I've had the pleasure of meeting some. We might even have
several in the room here.
In the room here tonight. Yeah. So,
but that, you know, the executive order on President Obama in 2012 gave an opportunity to over 700,000 youth who were brought here as children, who, you know, did all the right stuff, went to middle school, grade school, high school, college. We paid for all of that, and they're working, and they have to renew every 2 years. And that's great, but there's 1,700,000 more that are eligible that can't get in the program. These are kids that are graduating from Rice that can't get a job because they don't have legal status. It's a low-hanging fruit, and it's ridiculous. Our politicians can't pass a DACA. The other solution for the workforce issues are the 11 million people who are here working, have been here years. You know, we're proposing, I've talked to Cornyn, I've talked to others, if we have workers people who've been here 5 years, and let me hire them, take them to Homeland Security, pay for the background check, pay for the fingerprinting, and put them on a W-2 payroll where they can pay and match payroll taxes and work. And not a path to citizenship, just a work permit, just like a guest worker. Every 3 years they have to renew. I mean, if the government would do something as simple as that and pass DACA, we wouldn't have a nursing shortage. We wouldn't have, you know, I mean, there would be millions of people who have been here 5 years and more who could go to work in the morning. It is so simple. And the amazing thing is, for those of us who get Social Security, you take 1 million undocumented workers and put them on a W-2 payroll. That's just like an employee. That is $4.75 billion per year that goes to Social Security. I mean, think about that. Multiply that, it's $40 billion per year if they did all of them. So, I mean, it is so much common sense, it's scary. And you know, I talked to some elected officials, well, that's amnesty. That's the right. I talked to the left, well, no, they have to be citizens. Well, I guarantee you, the 11 to 20 million who are here, 98%, just want a driver's license, and they want to quit worrying about being deported, and they want to take care of their families. So it's so simple.
And in the meantime, I'm going to get up and come to you guys because I know you want to get in on this conversation. But in the meantime, while the system is so terribly broken the way you just described it, Stan, I'm going to switch microphones here. The way that the system is broken, the labor brokers are now the ones taking advantage of this situation. We've got a couple of really special guests here. Charles Foster, one of the foremost immigration attorneys in the country. Would just love to get your thoughts on what you've heard here so far. What are we missing, if anything? What would you like to add to this conversation?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you and Jean are doing this. It's been a very interesting conversation. The only point I would like to make is just sort of picking up on what Stan just said about the common sense stuff, doing something for DACA, work visa program. I've come to the reluctant conclusion Congress will never, ever do anything until we do something effective about the border. I've worked on some proposals, some of which wound up in the Senate bill, and I thought that was that's not what we wanted, but it wasn't anything we wanted, but at least it addressed the issue. And until we have an effective system on the border, until we can say in reality and indeed and the impression that the border is not, quote, wide open. Now that's a misnomer because people are being released to pursue their asylum claim. But we have to fix that because until we do, Congress will never do anything. John Cornyn is a good example of that. I know John very well. Interestingly, it wasn't that many years ago he was for a freestanding DACA bill, but nobody is talking about that today. We have gone from bad to worse, and we've got to address that.
So the bill that was just voted down 3 weeks ago addressed a lot of the issues at the border, and it's my understanding that when President Biden comes on Thursday of this week, that he's going to try to push to reintroduce that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I do know the politics. He's going to hold, from a political point of view, he's going to try to hold the Republicans responsible. They demanded immigration reform legislation that would effectively address the issues on the border in order to get the Ukrainian-Israel aid. And to surprise to everyone, the Democrats went along with that. Typically, they'd say, for enforcement, we want something on our side, DACA, more visas. But they said, no, we'll give you all the enforcement provisions because we're so determined to get aid for Ukraine and Israel. So what the president's going to say, and he should say, you guys now are standing in the way. You asked for it, and now you're the ones opposing legislation that I think would be effective because they need more people. They also need to simplify the system, and some of that legislation did that.
And it's bipartisan. We also have Eduardo Aguirre here, who was the Immigration and Naturalization Service Director under President George W. Bush, and also former ambassador to Spain. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I was the director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The INS was disbanded when Homeland Security was created. You know, I've come to believe that right now the U.S. hates immigration and loves the immigrant. When you get to meet somebody, you're taken with their industry or their intellect or whatever it is. I'm into lamentations, and that is, I don't expect much of our political system right now. I think our politicians have fallen into the hole of demagoguery, and they found an issue that is appealing to demagoguery. And I'm not sure they want a solution. Quite frankly, we in this room are interested in a solution. But I don't believe our political leaders, I use that word advisedly, are willing to find a solution. For one thing, it takes heavier lifting than complaining about the problem. And for another, I think it would take away, it's almost like Lucy and Charlie Brown, they take the ball away every time Charlie tries to kick it. It's a great idea for them. So I'm sure I'm coming across negative, and that's because I feel negative about it.
Well, do not apologize. You feel what you feel. Okay, I want to know what everybody else in here feels. Anybody have something right here, and then I'm coming over to you. Yes, sir.
Just a question. Do you think we don't have the humorists of age that used to shame our politicians into some sort of form of reality, but what would it take to shame the politicians to do the right thing? In this particular case, because it's an economic issue of prime importance.
I think we as voters are really in charge. And yet we, to paraphrase what I said earlier, we hate politics, we hate the politicians, but we vote for them one way or the other. And so we allow ourselves to be deluded that that we're influencing their actions. I don't see it happening.
That's what this whole thing is about. This whole Civil Dialogues initiative is about trying to educate us as voters so that when we go to the polls, we're not just voting based upon the talking points of whatever media outlet we happen to have been watching. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make 4 points. I'm an immigrant. I was 14 when I came. At 17, I joined the United States Air Force and served for 32 years. Came out of retirement twice. So I paid back my benefits that I got from being a U.S. citizen. One of the things that I'm missing from you guys is just street sense, common sense. You guys talk about a lot of academics. I call myself a street preacher. I'm out there. I have adopted a young Hispanic young lady as a single parent. I'm not a racist. I'm a humanist. So I'm very glad Elizabeth talked about racism. I'm very glad in the movie they talk about humans. We're not going to change, the gentleman on the left, we're not going to change society. You got to change yourself. And when I hear some of you, you're academics. I live in the barrio. I live with the people out there. I've grown up in 3rd Ward when I was 14 years old and homeless, and a black woman took me in. Everything I do every day is for her. I don't hear that. And the gentleman in the Netscape, I was working for IBM at the time. I had just come out of active duty. I was doing Lotus 123. We did not expect internet to do what it does now with the social media. It is not a social media. It's an evil media. You know, people, you talk about bubbles and that. You're not going to blow it unless while you are living in the bubbles. And I don't mean to demean you. And the gentleman from the Mexico Society, I'm an immigrant, sir. I don't think any of you are immigrants.
Well, here I want to add something to what you're saying. Obviously, in 30 minutes, it's impossible to address all the issues on the table. But here's what I think. There's 2 levels of argument. The first is obviously the facts, numbers. They do matter. I think what you said was really important. How many people actually participated in the civil rights movement in the 1960s? 2%. The 98% of all Americans were sitting on the sidelines. 2%. You say it takes 3.5%. Either number is low. That's all it takes to change a society. But we have to insist in the numbers. I think Linda also asked a question about the demographics. I like to talk about demographics. I like to talk about how we're getting to be a country of old folks. But really important here is think about the labor force. We have 11 million, at least 11 million undocumented workers. We have a workforce of 160 million people in the United States. 11 million are undocumented. 13 to 15 million, I don't know how many, Charles probably knows better than I do, are green card holders. Those are immigrants too. That's 25 million right there. And you got how many visa holders? H-1B, H-2A, H-2B, TN, and on. A few more millions. And then those like you who have become citizens are also, I don't know, 15, 20 million? So you have a workforce of 160 million people, of which, 40, 50 million are actually immigrants? The numbers ought to matter, and it should really tell us about the contributions of immigrants to this country. That's the level of the numbers, but I want to say one more thing about this. We have to address the fears of the right. It's very easy for some of us on the left, which I think I kind of am, left of center, that the country is changing. It's culturally changing. And they got to find a focus for their fears. They got to find somebody to blame, some understanding to their own anxieties. And I think that they focused on immigrants. Why? Because immigrants are in minorities, by the way. Because immigrants are different, because they're powerless, because they don't vote, because they try to hide in the shadows, because they can be detected and deported and things like that. How do we address their fears and say, what are you really afraid of? What is really making you afraid of the immigrant if you have enough instances right in front of you where an immigrant is mowing your lawn, taking care of your baby, taking care of your grandma at the home, building your house, and on and on. So I think fear is a legitimate feeling. The question for us who are making the case for immigration is, okay, fine, we can make it with the numbers. How do we address the emotional level of the argument?
John, I'd like for you to respond to what the gentleman had to say about the technology.
I so much want to, because I actually think you're the most important person in the room right now. And I think our job is to put you in the spotlight and take us out of the spotlight.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I want to answer the gentleman here.
Yeah.
One of the facts missing is the border crisis is a media crisis. More people come in through the airport legitimately and overstay with all the numbers there. None of you have talked about
exactly.
that.
And this is where I think that we can use, we can change the system to give people of more worth, if you will, than the media that keeps telling us what to think. We can't shut them up, but we can overpower them. So what we're trying to do is build technology so you can be heard, but maybe not in a big room, but when you talk with 5 other people or 6 other people, and we can do that hundreds of thousands of times, which we can now do technology-wise. We couldn't do that even before COVID. We now have the technology to do. I feel like the $6 million man, we have the technology. We can rebuild him, for those of us old enough to remember that. But we can do that. We can actually give you that power. And it's something we've done before. The internet did change business. It actually took a lot of powers that controlled everything and made them not so powerful anymore. We're in a bad place right now. Often when new technology happens, there's this, it's a cycle of technology. When the printing press started, we think of the Reformation. We think academically, we think of Reformation, all these wonderful things happened. But for the first 100 years, it was bad. It was people riots and burned at the stake because they were heretics. But after a generation learned how to use that new technology, then they started getting the real benefits of it. And that's when the Reformation happened. That's when regular people got more power and society became a better place. I've said for a long time now that our job, I think, at all sides is to get 100 years down to about 15 or 20. And I think we're about halfway through there, hopefully more than half.
Okay.
And that's going to happen by giving you all voices to each other and get all these other machines and powers out of our heads.
Okay, we have another question here.
Yes, I really think we all should remember that the politicians work for us, we don't work for them. And I think it's crucial to make a move. They will move when we move differently. We can't keep doing what we're doing because they're not going to move. There's no reason. So let's remember, they work for us. And it doesn't matter which party you're in. You know what's right, we know what's right, we know what's wrong. And let's just get along. And this is a beautiful forum because you're leading with love.
Well, go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, if I could just respond. I mean, I think the very practical thing that we want to think about, we can't change society or whatever, but when everyone says it's the politics that make people do what they want, I try to back that out as an academic, like what does that really mean? And what it really comes down to is the primaries. If you can get your friends and 5 other friends and they get 5 more friends, not many people show up. Less than 2% of the people are showing up at the primaries. And if you have your own coalition that shows up at the primaries, you can make all the difference in the world. Pick your candidate, go to the primaries with all your friends, and you will make a difference.
Good point.
Amen.
Yes, sir. What is your question or comment?
I think that one of the important things is, how can we get the media to tell the exact correct statistics on what's happening at the border? My impression is that there's all these, that Tony talks about, the people that cross the border, but the number of people that actually cross the border and don't get arrested by the INS is a very small number of people, I believe. And then they have all these crazy comments about all of the terrorists that come across the country. I'm sure that the government has arrested many people who have tried to do that because all these terrorists are in our systems that we use to track people from around the world. but the media does not really explain or tell the people the true statistics of what's really happening at the border. And I think that's one of the issues that needs to be corrected. And we're not just talking about Fox News, we're talking about the New York Times, we're talking about even Rice, your center, providing the real statistics on what's really happening, because I don't think the impression of what's happening is totally different from what's really happening. I know it's a problem, but the statistics are really not being explained to the American people.
Just a very quick observation on that, Linda, if I may. I'm not an expert on communications or the media. Linda may have something to say about that. I think John may as well. But it seems to me that good news are not news. Good news is almost, by definition, bad news. And so how do you change coverage? I get phone calls from journalists all the time, internationally, nationally, and of course from Mexico and from the border and so on. They want to know what is going on. But it's all about crises. It's all about what's bad, who's coming, what are the threats, the dangers. And then when I talk to them about the good news, the possibilities, the potential, they okay, thank you. We'll talk later. I'll find you later. So I don't know about the media.
So it's part of the model, okay, what you're describing. Negative news, of course, is what sells. I think part of the answer is for all of us to become better consumers of media. That we have to educate ourselves not to just look at one particular station or read one particular newspaper, whether it's paper or online or whatever. We have to become educated media consumers. And that's one of the reasons why, when I met John probably 5 or 6 years ago on a panel where we were talking about bridging divides and bringing people together. And I loved the concept of all sides, so that you can literally look at the same story, okay? And the headlines are different. The left headline is different from the center headline, is different from the right headline. I did a session where I was addressing some young people, high school students. And we picked a story and we went to the site and I said, okay, so what's the truth? What do you believe? You can't just take one outlet's view of how something happened. It's a different world now. The internet, John, changed everything. It did. It changed everything. I mean, I grew up, with the 3 nightly news people, okay? We all did, and now we've got hundreds of channels. And then you've got people online who call themselves reporters, okay? Those of us who really are journalists, Jean, I'm coming to you, okay? Just giving you a warning. But no, seriously, a lot of people do not know what journalists do, how we were trained, how we source, what you have to do to go through the process before you even get on the air or write something that's going to appear in print. It's a process. It's a profession. And just because you opened a blog and went out and started talking to somebody does not make you a journalist. But if you are not an educated consumer, you won't know that. One of the conversations that Jean and I have had recently is with our alma mater, University of Missouri, Columbia. Talking to them about what we can do to help us become better educated consumers of media. Take it away, my friend.
So Linda and I are talking to the University of Missouri School of Journalism, the best journalism school in the country. Yes. We plan on one of the sessions like this, one of the civil dialogue sessions we want to have, the focus will be the media. And I think the University of Missouri is hoping to host that session, very much so. We were going to Mark Updegrove at the LBJ Library, wanted to host it. He's doing immigration next month. So it is important to have an entire program like this that focused on the media. I wish I had kept track for every time you all mention the media tonight. If we played a drinking game, we'd be drunk. But they play an outsized role in what's going on right now. So stay tuned. We hope you all will come. Columbia, Missouri's lovely, if that's where we have it, but we're going to tackle this issue one-on-one, yes, hopefully.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Who else? Yes.
Thank you very much for doing this. I have two questions. One is, what, in the absence of legislation to fix the issue, what can we be doing to help resolve this? And my second question is, in the absence of legislation to fix this issue, whether perceived or real, whatever, at the border, because we're sending migrants north and displacing people and treating them like chattel. What does the scenario look like 3 to 5 years ahead if we don't address this with legislation?
Love those questions. Liz, please.
So a couple of years ago, when I went as part of a lobbying delegation with my AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, I was told something by my representative staffer that really stayed with me.
Liz, move your hair again, please.
Really?
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Great, okay. So the staffer told me after we had met with him and we had pitched, support this, support that, this is why you should, da-da-da-da-da. And the staffer told me, Ms. Mendoza, do you know how many calls and faxes we get every week telling us to do the exact opposite of what you were pitching to me? And do you know how many people I hear from your side? What do you think the congressman is going to do if he's getting 5,000 phone calls, faxes, and emails a week telling him no, and he's hearing from maybe 15 people telling him to say yes? So what can you do? I'm a broken record at work when I'm meeting with people and talking about this. Contact your member of Congress. Your voice matters. Call, email, ask for a meeting. Make your voice heard. You're here, you're all here, you care about this. That's why you made the time to be here tonight. You care about this issue, you want to be informed about this issue. Wherever you fall on this issue, you're here for a reason tonight. Contact your member of Congress, tell him or her how you feel about this issue, and what you want your member of Congress to support on your behalf, because as this gentleman said before, they work for us, not the other way around. And they need to hear from you. It's really, really important.
I want to address if I may, Linda, the second question, because I think it's a really important question. Where are we going to be in 3 to 5 years, I think you asked. Look, I remember the very first migrant caravan, 2012, 12 years ago. There were 7,000 people crossing the border into Mexico, marching through Mexico and up to the U.S. border. That dogged the Obama administration. That certainly was a problem under the Trump administration. He used different tactics, but the problem continued. Went down a little bit after Mexico cracked down on immigration, but it went back up. And it's certainly troubling the Biden administration and even threatening its re-election in the fall. What has changed in Cuba? Nothing. What has changed in Venezuela? Nothing. What's changed in Central America, perhaps except for El Salvador? We can debate that. That's controversial, but hardly anything. What has really changed in the Middle East? Nothing. South America, Ecuador and other countries racked by violence and poverty? Nothing. What has changed in terms of the U.S. system other than more resources for enforcement, but our ability to process migrants and to either accept them or send them home? Nothing. We're not allocating additional resources to that. So I think if we don't change the major pieces of the puzzle, there won't be any structural change, and they will keep coming. The only reason why we saw the numbers drop in January is because Blinken, Mayorkas, and I think a representative from the White House went to Mexico. I don't know what they told President Lopez Obrador, who's been playing the immigration card in Mexico to kind of annoy the Biden administration. They're not really the closest of friends. But the numbers dropped 50% because Mexico decided to crack down. So the numbers are down. But why should the numbers depend on whatever Mayorkas and Blinken can tell Lopez Obrador or the next administration? Those are patches. And the moment they want, they're going to open the spigot again, and migrants will continue to flow. But the structural issues of poverty and the forces that are pushing people, the push forces and the pull forces, which is the labor market in the United States, are not changing. And so to me, in 3 to 4 years, to give you the shortest answer, we'll be in the same situation.
And I think it's going to get worse. And I think the solution, as hard as it would be for the users of that labor. Let's take a building like Rice or Exxon or Tesla. When they build a building, they don't tell the general contractor, hey, make sure all my workers are legal, W-2 employees who pay taxes, have workman's comp if they get hurt. They say, build me a building for X dollars. And that's where it stops. So what happens? Well, you get labor where you can get it. And the magnet are these jobs. You got a guy making $8 a week in Mexico who can come over here and make $20 an hour. I mean, that's incredible. They'll do anything to get here. And we have no requirements by owners, by anybody, that the people that build our houses, that build our buildings, our churches, are legal, have IDs. We know who they are. And that is ridiculous. But how hard would that be for all of us to demand of our builders in the boardrooms, the people that here at Rice, are they people that clean the building? Are they legal? People that do the landscape, are they legal? Maybe not. We don't know, because we don't require a tamper-proof ID, some sort of verification system like you do in India, like you do in the European Union. I mean, we're sort of in the backwoods here when it comes to labor. So
and Stan, I know you agree with Liz, what she said too about calling your Congress people, because you've had the same experience. Yeah. We've got another question back here.
Right. Hello, my name is Jonathan Trujillo. I was born and raised here in Montrose. I have many friends, neighbors, classmates who are undocumented, and I just wanted to make 2 points. The first one is goes to the issue of longevity of this issue. To me, what's astounding is we have 60, 80% of all the folks who are undocumented have been in this country for longer than 10 years, right? So this idea that it's kind of like a situation where we're still trying to decide the outcome of this doesn't really make sense to me. To me, it's a situation where we're kind of negating what already exists. Like, folks are in this country, folks are contributing to this country, and so it's really interesting to kind of think about the longevity of this issue, how things haven't budged, and also to your point, it would be, there is this idea of, can we just start going and checking who is a citizen, who is not in terms of labor? I think, to be quite honest with you, I think that is something most people don't want to happen. I think it's a way of kind of kicking the can down the road and continuing on having this issue. I think it's a way of avoiding it and making it possible. And I think, to me, the other thing that's interesting is the fact that you have a kind of dormant community politically. In 2006, there was a couple legislations that were being debated that would make life for undocumented folks really difficult in this country. And there was protests in Chicago, protests in Dallas, and folks really activated to stop this from happening. And that was kind of the only time in which people organized politically for such an issue. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on SB 5 and how that
SB 4? SB 4.
I'm sorry. Yeah, SB 4 and how the constitutionality of that bill, how that will fare, the political responses to that. But yeah, really excited to hear your perspectives on this issue, and hope we can continue on working on this.
Thank you for your comments. I'm glad you brought up SB 4. We are almost right at 7 o'clock. if it's okay with you guys, we're going to keep going. If anybody needs to leave, we can go for just a minute. I'm going to ask you to answer the young man's question. Liz, you want to take that?
So Friday night, I was at a church with raise your hands, two of my colleagues, awesome people. We were at a church in Pasadena, have been invited to talk about specifically this law, because it's caused a lot of fear in the community. So I don't know how many people are familiar with what this gentleman talked about, but there was legislation that was passed that has caused a lot of uproar in the immigrant community, because for lack of a better phrase, it would basically be a show me your papers kind of bill, something that we saw in Arizona. Part of the legislation has been enjoined, part of it hasn't. But the one part, the most troublesome part, for a lot of us troublesome part of the legislation is if law enforcement has probable cause to stop me, and of course, what exactly is the law enforcement person's probable cause to stop and detain me? As part of that detention stop, he or she can ask me to show proof of my immigration status in this country. So that is obviously, that's worrying a lot of people. I told my husband just the other day, I was born here, my husband was born here, we're the children of immigrants. Our children were born here. I'm planning on ordering our passport cards and keeping them in our wallet so that we have something to show if we ever get stopped by a cop and he doesn't like the color of my hair, or he doesn't like that my last name is Mendoza, and somehow has some probable cause to ask me about my status. So it's a really, 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 really troublesome thing. There's a lot of fear in the community. There were easily over 100 people on a Friday night at a church who came to hear us talk and ask us questions about what do we do.
And Liz, this bill is the law is supposed to take effect next week, right?
I believe March the 5th.
March 5th.
This is a state law, not a federal.
It's a state law.
Signed by our governor.
That is correct.
State law. Yes, sir.
So actually two comments. One, there's a proposition out for prohibiting the purchases by foreigners, specifically Chinese, et cetera, for property. But the second question I have, which we haven't addressed, is how much money is being spent to support the politicians to continue to do this sort of very ineffective dynamic controversy, because it doesn't make sense to me that this is the only political issue on the table that isn't backed by enormous amounts of money. And I don't know if that's the hand grenade on the table that everybody's talking about, but no one's discussed that, and I'd like to hear your opinion, because I think there's money behind this. I don't think it's just the common man, so to speak.
Now, I would totally agree with you. If, I'm not pitching a newsletter or magazine, but if you get this month's Texas Monthly, the article about a very wealthy oil man and what he's trying to do with Republican primaries, it's scary. Because you're right, the money, because of the primary system, 6 to 8% vote, it's really easy to win a primary if you have enough money. But that's but I totally agree. And I don't know why we can't do something about campaign spending. I mean, as a nation, it is out of control.
John, I'll let you.
I want to go back to what actually you and Jean are doing is really the answer to this. You're not going to be able to stop the money from flowing. We tried that, and then it goes to a different place, and then it gets less regulated. There's less money in the parties, which actually means there's no unified group that wants a governing majority. They just want to win their issue, which seems to be a problem. But if you really have the kind of dialogue, civil dialogues that these two ladies are really running, but you can bring them in mass, so you can bring it to millions of people, then you give the power back to the people and away from the power brokers, whether it's money or politics or what have you. And then they can demand the changes, and then these great solutions can become law. It's really kind of that simple. I don't think it's a matter of trying to stop them with a law or signing a ministry of truth that tells us what to think. I don't think that's going to quite do it. I think it's a little bit more fundamental. It's a matter of us enabling each other to be more powerful than all those noises.
John, thank you for bringing us full circle. And this is a perfect place for us to stop. I know we've gone a little bit over, but clearly most of you are still here, which means that you care deeply about this issue. I want to thank you, really, on behalf of Jean and me and everybody who helped put this together. Thank you for your time, your attention, your passion for our democracy, and for doing your part. Just by being here, you're
Linda,
doing
could
a
I
lot.
throw one thing out?
Yes.
I would like to introduce my two dreamers, Emiliano, Jose. These young men are brought here as children. Jose is with me, a project manager on the Methodist Cypress job. When you go out 290, that's his project. Emiliano is a former banker, now is working with a nonprofit. And two wonderful young men, and they're just so concerned that they may be deported. And that's not fun to go home and think about that, but I've assured them we're going to do everything we can to keep that from happening.
Amen. Thank you, Stan, for helping us continue to put a human face on this issue. We started off by talking about respecting each other. We are all worthy and deserving of respect as humans. Every single one of us. And I love this conversation that we've had here tonight. I'd like to invite you to continue the conversation. civildialogues.us. If we didn't get to some of your questions, especially those of you online who are streaming, we didn't get your questions, so just go to civildialogues.us, send us in your questions, we'll ask our panelists to weigh in. We want to start building this community so that we take this and we go far beyond the Baker Institute in Houston, Texas. Thank you all so much for coming. The breakout session that Dan is going to host is happening right here as soon as we wrap up. Tony, you want to say a couple of final words? No, I'm good. Are you good? Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for coming, and the breakout session will begin in just one moment. We'll give those of you who need to leave a chance to go.
Raymond, it was so nice to meet you. Safe travel.
Yes, thank you very much.